Alrighty, alrighty. So gonna just gonna make sure it's working. But alrighty. So where is it? Alright, so welcome back to the live stream. We're a bit late today. Sorry, I lost track of time, but um, I just I thought of an interesting topic today. We talk about the recent developments with China, and this um, the Belt and Road. We're kind of see this war's kind of brought to light some of the tangible effects of the Belt and Road on international trade. Um, and I think I'll kind of start with this. My hot take. Then I'm going to kind of unpack today is I think that the in my for those of you who saw my podcast, my guest, and I'll drop the link here, but my guest had basically had said that China's done the Belt and Road, has been active throughout the Belt and Road, has treated the Belt and Road almost like they're doing it secretly and slowly, and and they do it quietly and slowly, and that when you don't want to move stealthily, and they didn't do it as quickly. I think that's their mistake, but that's their mistake in the long term for because they have a lot of economic problems. I mean, their economy runs on debt pretty much, and inflated, and it's heavily inflated. But the I think the main my main hot take on I guess digressing, but my main hot take is um, the Strait of Hormuz is basically useless. Is useless to Iran now. China, um, China gets most of its oil from 90% of its oil from I believe like 90% of its oil was a stat I saw. Vast majority of Chinese oil it comes from Iran, and for years the Belt and Road, part of it the Belt and Road, and I can pull that up after Belt and Road network. Here we go. Um, where is it? Um, oh yeah, okay, and share screen. So if you look at this, scroll up, kind of a high level um, overview of what the Belt and Road is, and essentially the Chinese have built these massive industrial projects and have effectively built pipelines and railways connecting various countries in East and Central Asia, Far East, Central Asia, and Europe, and parts of Africa and Southeast Asia. And what essentially this has done is there's three major things the Chinese are doing. They're trying to become the lender of last resort for in in terms of sovereign debt to sovereign, I guess sovereign debt, for lack of a better term, like debt to at the government level, national level, or infrastructure. But then they're also trying to build, you see this outline. They're trying to build an Arctic route, and then the other aspect as well is ports. The Chinese have built these massive have built have, are were kept building these ports, and you can kind of see these dots all around. And what essentially this has done is it's economic colonialism in the sense that they look at this. It's economic colonialism in the sense they'll look at the Belt and Road and say to themselves, well, sorry, they'll go to a country. Sorry, for example, they'll go to a country and say, well, we want to build we want to build you a railway station to transport your oil, like to transport your energy, your refined products, or we'll build you a port. And what this essentially does is it creates almost like a long term incentive, and I guess incentive is a bad word. I think it creates a long term reliance or incentive to rely on the Chinese government. So for, it's that they say once you know give an inch, take a mile. I think this is, and that's the kind of analogy to use here. Like the because a lot of these countries, don't forget, like a lot of these African countries that they're giving to are Central Asian, or sorry, Central Asian or East Asian countries. A lot of them don't have infrastructure. Are you relying on the Chinese to build their infrastructure? But when they can't repay, and especially the African ones, they're notorious for this in Africa. Especially when they can't afford to pay for the infrastructure, they can't afford to. They'll default on their debt. So, for example, Chinese will go to will go to, I don't know, like let's choose a country here. They'll go to, I guess that's, sorry, it's very hard. It's a bit, I'll zoom in. Anyways, they'll go to one of these countries without zooming, without dwelling. They'll go to one of these countries like Ethiopia or Somalia here, and they'll say to them, "Well, we can build you a port. We're going to loan you the money to build the port." And what happens is these economies, they can't afford to pay back the money, so what they do is they default on their debt. And when they default on the debt, meaning they can't pay back their interest payments, so they're at a loss. So the Chinese government say, well, we in our contract we can take 50% or 60%, or we can take we seize a majority ownership of of the mine or the railway or the port. So then in a way they kind of own, and this is the modern day Silk Road. And I heard this, and I my podcast guest made this kind of apt analogy. He said this is exactly, they complain about the British 100 years ago. This is what the British did to ever. I mean, find me a nation on earth that doesn't have some sort of guilt like that on their hand. And I guess not trying to get political, but and it's the same analogy. It's essentially economic colonialism to control natural resources. And I think this has two facets, that, and one concerning facet as well. Like, well, I'll start with the concerning one. That Carney, I saw in the paper this morning, Carney reportedly has is changed his mind about building the Arctic, military attachments, like building up Arctic military Canadian military. So for those of you that don't know, maybe watching this and don't know, Canada every year releases two documents. They release the federal budget, and they release the federal industrial defense strategy. And these two documents outline. So the federal industrial and defense strategy outlines the specific blueprints for what the government's planning to build in terms of infrastructure around industrial projects, mega projects, industrial mega projects, but also around the around defense infrastructure. And this could be adjacent. This could be adjacent or aligned with various sectors. So you could see so you could see a lot of other sectors like I guess you see the housing sector. You see numerous. You see housing. You see utilities. Probably you see a lot of different sectors as a byproduct of these um, of the industrial sector and the defense sector being pumped up. I guess if there's money being poured into one sector, it spill over into the next because of the adjacent industries. And Carney they're talking now about Canada has a mounting debt problem. Although the deficit they reported the PBO watchdog. What's his name? Francois Philippe, but he has a new replacement, I believe. But what's the name of the parliamentary budget officer? Sorry, that's the name. Parliamentary budget officer, and the parliamentary budget officer currently had issued a report saying that I believe it's who is current PBO in Canada. Not Francois Philippe. It's Annette Ryan. Annette Ryan is a new one. Um, yeah, he's the new one. He replaced Francois Philippe. But Francois Philippe, for those of you that don't know, in prior live stream, and then so if you read some of my articles and my newsletter, my podcast and stuff, and I talked about, actually, funny enough, that he's a liberal who issued dire warning, and because it was a 30-something% increase in the federal deficit coming into last year, coming into this current into Carney's prime ministership, or parliament, or I guess prime ministership. And but anyways, Carney's essentially retracted that and said, we've improved our debt position, we've reduced our federal deficit, but we can't afford. So we can't really afford. So anyways, we can't afford to build up the Arctic. So and this kind of raises the concern. There's a valid, and it's a valid concern. But if the Chinese are building an Arctic route, the Russians are building an Arctic route, and the ice caps are melting, so to speak. Doesn't it make sense that it should make sense in theory that the West also built up their Arctic route, and the U.S. has Alaska, but I don't, but Canada, we have a unique opportunity, I think, to sort of um, build up infrastructure. If we're going to build infrastructure, you may as well build where it's going to benefit long term. And I think the far north is, the amount of critical minerals we have, the amount of natural rare earth elements we have lying beneath the ice, and if it's melting up north, that we need, I think, stronger military presence. It's a smart way to invest. I mean, we have a lot of these green energy. They're not to crap on green energy. I think there's a lot of benefits, but I think there's more nuance. A lot of people, when they think of green energy, they think of, I think it's kind of like the way on a balance sheet, you have assets and liabilities. I think certain green energy are a liability, certain green energy are an asset. You're going to talk to me about uranium, I would tell you that's an asset. Build uranium, because uranium with SMR production, that has a lot of potential to provide stable stability. But when you look at green energy like wind turbines, hydro is also a very good one. I will say too. Quebec is primarily hydro, but I think Quebec's one of the largest producer of hydro in Canada, I believe. Um, but what you and then I guess in Alberta we have energy. Sorry, but back to clean energy, oil. I mean, sorry, but back to clean energy, we have wind turbines. But the problem with wind turbines and solar is only good 50% of the day, 50% of the day because there's sunlight when there's sunlight, and and then the other one is sorry, what I'm blanking. Solar and wind turbine. And wind turbine, you need motors to keep it running. So in a sense, wind turbine is not you lose most of that. I think it's like you lose more than 60 or 70% of the energy that's generated in wind turbine. So it's highly inefficient. So when you're trying to power a mega industry, when you're trying to think of in terms of the sheer scale of power, and when you look at power demand, electrical power demand, talk about AI infrastructure. Trump, China, like the Americans, the Chinese, the Europeans, they're all bullish on AI infrastructure. But a lot of people don't think about what that means. And I heard someone talk about, this is where I am bullish on green energy is I think uranium is going to be, SMRs are the new thing, because SMRs, they're like almost like building blocks. The way I was explained to it at the Global Energy Show 2 years ago was, I first heard about them was, um, when you build a real nuclear reactor, you're spending trillions of dollars to put up, or hundreds of billions of dollars, possibly trillions of dollars to set up these giant nuclear reactors. But to set up a giant nuclear reactor, but there's a lot of safety concerns. SMRs have virtually zero, have virtually the safety concerns are next to none, and it's, instead of costing hundreds of billions of dollars, they might cost a couple $1 million to set up one module, and each module contributes a certain amount. Like, I guess, how much SMR, how much power can an SMR module produce? 300 megawatts per hour. Sorry, per unit. So essentially, let's say you could have, you needed 100,000 megawatts. So you just, I guess, 100,000. So I guess 100,000. I don't know. You buy as many as you need, essentially. So like a nuclear reactor might produce, like, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of megawatts, but you don't, or a million megawatts, but you don't need a million megawatts or hundreds of thousands of megawatts. You only need half a million megawatts to run. And I think this is the key thing too, is I think we're going to see a lot of these tech giants like Nvidia, OpenAI, and all these things. They're going to build their own. We're going to see the beginning of private sector nuclear facilities owned by the private sector, and I mean, I mean, you can say a private sector like Cameco and all these private owned companies. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about companies who aren't even in the industry, who it's, the same way you'd buy a building for your company. You're going to have facilities to host your employees. They're going to begin to have facilities specifically meant for um, specifically meant for generating power, just because of the sheer scale. Um, but I guess I'll scroll down, and I guess this is a interesting. I guess kind of zoom in, um, to kind of show. So Tehran's right there. Isfahan. For those of you who don't know, these were the three cities. I think Isfahan and Mashhad. These were the ones that were bombed initially, I believe. But GFC, they have an entire rail network that leads to Beijing, and back to what I was talking about with the Hormuz becoming almost rendered useless for, I guess, the whole blockade rendering useless is, the UAE, and I talked about this last week, but the UAE is now building a pipeline, And then you have here. Let me go to my. I can show you. I have a map on my newsletter. Let's go. If you look at this map, and yeah. Anyways, so Habshan to Faraji, and they're basically bypassing the Strait of Hormuz. So the blockade almost rendered useless because they don't have to go. On the one hand, UAE now doesn't have to worry about sending their ships through. I use them as an example because they're a westernized, one of those westernized Muslim Arab countries in the Middle East that aren't really playing ball with aren't really playing ball with Iran. And funny enough, UAE's been hit more times. I saw an interview the other day, like I think I posted it here, and yeah, she was saying this minister. She was saying that in that video. You can check out my article, the Weekly Commodity Pulse. But um, it's she said like they've been hit more than Iran. So this is a country that's trying desperately to mitigate any long term damages this war might cause. So they're saying, the best way is this is an incentive to build a pipeline. So they left OPEC. Now they're building a pipeline, and if you look at the quota, they're talking about right now they're only outputting about a little over 3 million, 3.2 million barrels per day now, and their capacity is almost is almost 5 million barrels per day. I mean, that's kind of it's a very big. I mean, that's a jump, and I think this is where OPEC's going to begin. This is like a crack beginning to break open. Um, and again, back to my point with Strait of Hormuz, they're bypassing the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians have this land rail to get their sanctioned oil to China. I say sanctioned because a lot of their fleets are not registered. They're shadow fleets because there are sanctions on them. So where they used to be able to just sail ships away from without the U.S. blockade, now the U.S. blockade. So what do? Now they're just kind of being now China unveils. Well, we've had this rail station for years, and this is premeditated. This is not something that's new. Um, so it's not something that's new. You don't just pop out of nowhere and say, I have a rail station. That's not how it works. Um, and what they're doing is they're potentially going through, if you look at the map, they're going through friendly countries. So they're going, if I scroll up, you can see they're going through, anyways, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, those types of countries, Central Asia, Kazakhstan, um, Pakistan, anyways, there's a lot. They're going through all these different. They're going through these countries, and then they're going directly into China. And once they're in Chinese territory, I mean, it's free range to go anywhere in China. Um, and I guess the Chinese can actually redirect. It's easier for them, I guess, in a sense that they can just redirect on the different tracks where they want it to go. The energy for storage. It's when they get their crude, but the Chinese can then use that to fuel, pun intended, I guess, as fuel, pun unintended, I guess. Actually, unintended pun, but they're using it to fuel their Belt and Road initiatives. Um, and again, like they rely on the crude oil for their refined products. They have their own processing. They have their own processing. Um, and I also know that the mining industry, mining critical minerals, rare earth elements. That's China's heavily involved in that, and that's a big aspect to it's a very crude intensive field. It's a very crude intensive industry, mining, because you need the refined products for all the machinery. And I mean, electrical is just not in the picture right now as replacing traditional fossil fuel running machinery. It's just more cost effective, and that's, to be honest, only the large cap or mega cap could probably afford to transition completely, given the price. uh, and yeah, I think I know that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. I thought it'd be interesting to just kind of run through my thoughts on that. Um, and so yeah, I know it started. I'm gonna end it a bit earlier today. I know we're only doing about 20 minutes today, because it started a bit late. I lost track of time. Busy week. But for those of you that are listening, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn notifications on so you don't miss an episode. And so see you guys next week.